Mark Wheatley, and welcome to episode 207 of the Wheatley podcast. Thank you very much for joining us wherever you're doing so. Big thank you to Sean Kilmartin for coming on last week. If you weren't aware what Power Slap is, now you do know. And if you want to have a look at it, it's not for the faint of heart, but it's certainly an interesting vocation he's got going there. So fair play to Sean, and he was very good guest, very good chat we had with him. You can support us and buy me a coffee, link in description, all the rest of the stuff. But my guest this week, he is an author and he's an advocate for mental health, and his name is Conor Nolan. How are you doing, Conor?
Very good, very good. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. So we were just discussing the difficult conditions out there today, foggy and frosty and everything else.
Quite treacherous indeed, yeah, quite treacherous. Thank God we're indoors, huh?
Well, that's what I was going to say. Like, I just mentioned I was studying from a theatre test, but you were actually on the roads and stuff. But it's dodgy out there. But like, it's a good day for a good chat about all sorts of things. And I think I'm very delighted to have you on. Obviously, I have to give a shout out to Killian Groom, the man who recommended you to come on, and this is his second recommendation. So fair play to Killian as always for the support. Conor, we always kind of start in the same place. Could you give us a history of your upbringing, please?
Can indeed. So as I always, and I say this in every talk, I say I'm from Cavan, as the phrase goes. We all have our problems. Unfortunately, I'm from Cavan. I'm from West Cavan. I'm from a town called Black Lion. To the chef Nevin Maguire, you might have heard of.
Yeah.
I'm from the same town as him. My mother's claim to fame is she knew him before he was famous. So I'm from there. I'm the eldest of four. Actually, this is quite an age gap. I'm 25, and my siblings I have a brother who's 14, I have a sister who's 12. She runs the house, and I have a brother who's 7. So it's quite an eclectic mix. It's great crack. So I'm from there. I went to college in Galway, and I work here in Newry. Upbringing wise, Big Black Lion's a sort of small town. They kind of like rural Ireland kind of thing. But it was very pleasant. My troubles with my mental health didn't really start until I was like a teenager. So like childhood wise was very pleasant. It was I was spoiled rotten for a long time being the only child, but then, the little ones came along then. But yeah, it was very, very pleasant. I was lucky to have both parents in my life and still do, and in the full of their health. So that blessing isn't lost on me, and I've never kind of forgot that.
Absolutely. You obviously mentioned there about mental health and kind of, we always ask, like, when people first became aware, was your initial introduction to mental health your own difficulties, or had you seen it around you before that?
No, it was kind of when my own difficulties came along. So I was diagnosed with anorexia when I was 12, just as I started secondary school, just as I turned 13. And that was, I suppose, thrown in at the deep end. I know, like, nowadays, I know even like my little brother now, there's more talk in primary school about mindfulness and managing your emotions and all that stuff. That wasn't as common. Again, it's only 10, 15 years since I was in primary school, but it wasn't as common then. So again, you're kind of a stranger to it, so this feeling anxious and feeling all this stuff was completely alien. It wasn't mentioned. So it was like, again, baptism by fire, as the phrase goes. My first exposure was being in the thick of it, that kind of way. So
there, we've had people talk about eating disorders on here before, and again, it's not something that, unless you've experienced it, it's very difficult to kind of think of how it is, especially for, like you said, someone who was young at your age, especially. So was it like, how did you, I suppose, realize what was happening to you, and how did you approach your parents or a doctor about it?
So the one thing I said, and I said this in my first book, like, one thing I find about mental illness in general, be it an eating disorder, be it anxiety, depression, I think a big misconception is that one day you don't have it, and then the next day you do. It kind of comes upon you. That's not the case. It kind of sneaks in. It kind of weasels its way in. And with anorexia in particular, the way it happened for me was growing up. Like, I loved Gaelic football. Absolutely love. Again, being from Cavan, we're not great at it, but I loved it. And I wanted to be the best player I could be. But I quickly found out that I wasn't very good with the ball itself. So I knew that to be good, I had to be a better player physically. So I'd have to run quicker and be stronger and so on. So when I was like 10 or 11, I started like the Rocky scene, doing the push-ups and the sit-ups and all that stuff. It's strange to see a young like that age doing that. But it did start off in a healthy way, and it was done with a healthy intention. And at first, everything was grand, and it actually worked. I became a lot fitter and all that crack. But then, so one thing I've learned through counselling is that anorexia has different triggers. And the one for me was change, because there's a big thing with anorexia about control. So for me, it was the move from primary to secondary school that got the ball rolling. So as I got towards the end of primary school, these sort of anorexic tendencies began to kick in. So I became less concerned with, let's say, how well am I playing, more concerned with, am I exercising more this week than last week? Am I eating slightly less? And it sounds like such a strange thought process, because again, and I often think about this, one of our like primal instincts is don't starve, and anorexia goes against that. It goes to show how powerful it is. So over time, these tendencies begin to sneak in. You're looking in the mirror a lot more. You're analyzing the way you look. You're stepping on a weighing scales more often, and it just slowly creeps in. And then the next thing you know, months later, you've lost a power of weight. You are in danger physically, health wise. And I suppose when you say there about like approaching parents, you become an expert at hiding it. You will wear baggy clothes. You will, literally my I suppose window of opportunity in some ways, when this hit for me, my little sister was just born, so our house was very, very busy. And when you have a newborn baby in the house, all the focus is on it. It's easier, I suppose, for the actions of a 12 or 13-year-old to go slightly more unnoticed, and any parent will tell you that, because there's a newborn baby in the house. So literally, that was my window of opportunity to like eat less, or like act, hide that I wasn't eating. So and that's a sinister thing to say. That's where you find the gap in some sense. And like, in terms of like, you will hide, you lie about, oh no, I didn't go to football training there, I only, was hanging around with the lads. You'll hide the fact of how much you're exercising. And the reality is, you want help. Like, I wanted to turn around to my parents and say, I'm in the pits here, this is going to kill me. But you won't let yourself say it. And it got to the point where my parents intervened and said, you need help. And I was bought my GP, I got the counselling I needed. But like, I literally fought tooth and nail to not get the help. And this is one thing, like, people are very quick to criticize parents in general, but particularly when someone has anorexia, because it's such a visible, condition, the weight loss and so on. People looking in have no idea how hard the victim will fight to avoid the help. And I fought tooth and nail. No, I'm fine. I'm dead on. Don't worry. And again, you hide it any way you can. But the parents intervened. I was brought to the doctor. I got the help I needed. And thank God I came out the other side in one piece.
There's something there that kind of note to me where I think about control, because I've got anxiety and OCD tendencies and things, and a lot of that is control. And there was this idea of trying to order your day, like organize your day in exactly how you want it to happen. But that, doesn't come about. So what happens to you psychologically when it does get thrown into disarray or whatever? And I had that thing, and I'm better now because I did have counseling and therapy and stuff like that. But I had that kind of awful feeling in the pit of my stomach when I lost that sense of control. When I felt like, I was cycling to work and I got to puncture my tire, and all of a sudden the whole day was ruined and I couldn't do anything to save it and all. Did you experience that as you were going along? Because I think, like you mentioned there, like your parents intervened, but then you still had to deal with the idea of that control being taken away from you.
That's the biggest thing. So when the help comes along, you're now no longer at the in the driver's seat. You're now you're now getting help, but in your head, you're now at the mercy of the doctor, the counselor, the medical professionals. The control is being taken away from you. And this is why, like, one thing I will say, I've started a second book about anorexia in particular, and the one thing I say about it is, it will starve you, it will take you away from your loved ones, and it will ruin your relationships, because it like builds a wall around you and it separates you from people. So in that case, it separated me from my parents by stopping me from asking for the help. It'll separate you from friends, because you don't, like, if you're in your 20s, let's say, and you have it, you don't want to go out for dinner because you can't control what you're eating, so you're missing time with friends or with the girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever. So it's taking you away from that. And even the anxieties behind all that can disrupt your life as well. So, completely, like, when that control is taken away, you completely go into fight or flight. You begin to panic. And getting past that initial feeling, I think, is the hardest part of the recovery, because you can't lean into the help that's there until you accept the fact that you're now no longer in control. And that, well, sorry, I tell a lie. The anorexia is now no longer in control. You're taking back control in some sense.
Yeah, that's a great way of putting it, because then it becomes even more important that when you start talking about it and speaking to people about it, and being very open, the control that you have of it then is a big thing. That's what I found anyway. When I started writing about my mental health in blogs and stuff like that, and people started reading it, and all of a sudden you realize that all of that stuff that you never wanted people to know and you were ashamed of and embarrassed about for many different reasons, once you put it out there, that you're in control of it again, but in obviously a lot more positive way.
Yeah, one analogy I use here is, like, I'm not a fan of horror films, right?
Right.
Because I get scared shitless, pardon my language. But a great idea used in horror films is never show the audience the monster. Keep the audience imagining, because once you see the monster, yes, there's an initial fright, but then it goes away, because we fear the unknown. Better the devil you know, and all this kind of
Yeah.
thing. So once you face the demon, yes, it's tough at the start, but now you know what it looks like. Now you know the nature of the beast. So as you say, once you put it in words,
Yeah.
once you put it out there, and again, it's great that you mentioned being ashamed. Again, we know the stigma around suffering with our mental health, particularly in men.
Yeah.
And I do think we're improving on that compared to where we were 10 years ago. But I still think there's an incredibly powerful stigma there. And one thing I say in talks is, there's this old phrase: strong people, or particularly men, we bottled up. A man is meant to be as still as the ocean in times of turmoil.
Mm-hmm.
And I say to people, I know what it's like to bottle it up. And I've done that on more than one occasion. And I have bottled up some terrible things. And what I have noticed is, when you do that, everything in your life falls apart. Your work, your academics, your sport, your relationships, your family, everything goes down the drain. And I say that, like, the toughest, when people talk about strength, the toughest thing I've ever done, including any weight I've ever lifted, the toughest thing I've ever done is go to a counselor, go to friends, go to family. Like, I didn't, like, say, when I was a teenager, I was put in that position. When I was an adult, I sought out help myself. And seeking that help myself is the toughest thing I've ever done. Saying to friends and family and counselors that, I'm not well and I need help. And that act of facing the demon was tougher than bottling it up ever was. But once you do that, you've made the first step in the right direction, and everything begins to change.
Absolutely. I think it's with any mental illness, obviously it's something that we try and hide and we don't want anybody to know about. And sometimes it comes out that you can't hide it. Like, people will actually see, whether it's physical or a mental thing, that, like, it could come out and people will notice it. But when owning the situation, and like you said, I'm constantly kind of topping up on therapy, because, like, at the certain points in my life where I'm thinking I'm fine and I'm doing, my own thing. But then when you start struggling, you start noticing something that's starting to rankle you, which really shouldn't, for Steve to, and but I know that now because of what I've been through, and what I've been told and helped with by therapists. I think it's so, you're right there. What you say, like, it's so important for men, obviously for everybody, but men still, they do have that. And I was only talking to Sean about it last week. These big tough men, and they want to pretend they're tough, and nothing can, penetrate their armor and stuff. It's obviously a silly way to look at things, but like you said, it's when you're out there and you're doing your thing and you're learning. It's just a growth, constant growth. And I know you talk about this, and you're very forward in talking about it, and there's no shame now. But you've been through quite a bit to get to there, like, and you're still only 25, but, like, for 25-year-old to be thinking this way, I certainly wasn't thinking this way. I'm not patronizing, by the way, but when I was 25, I was bottling everything up, and it's
Yeah.
refreshing, I think, is what I'm trying to say, really.
Yeah, it's funny, like, when I was, like, I'm open about it now, but, like,
Hmm.
for instance, when I was in school, and, like, I was in counseling from the age of 13 to 14, and I was in counseling every Friday for a year. And I didn't want any of my friends or anyone in my year at school to know where I was. So every single Friday I came in at, like, say, 12 in the day. The school was informed as to what was happening, so, just to explain my absence. But I would come in late, and friends, and people would say, "Oh, where were you?" And every Friday I said, "I was at the dentist." Now it clicked to me years later. I says, "My friends mustn't have been too smart. Why was I going to the dentist 40 times in 1 year? Was I getting about, a filling every week?" But that's the excuse I used. I was at
Yeah.
the dentist, I was at the doctor, because how you dare fucking say you're in therapy, like God
No.
forbid you'd say it. And like now I have no shame in saying, "Oh yeah, I go to counseling regularly, or I went for a spell here or a spell there," because it's part of your health.
Mhm.
But again, it's this thing, it's like God forbid someone would think something is wrong with you. And I
Yeah.
hid it from I never told anyone in school. I only told very close friends that I had this thing, because I was so terrified of people thinking that I was, to use the phrase, not well in the head.
Yeah.
Now, like now I own the fact. Like I was there's a friend of mine here, and he's kind of my business partner in the whole book and talking thing. We went to a school one day together, a school in Ballyhonus. We met in Claremorris, and I drove the last leg of the journey. And we're on the way to the talk, and I said to him, "Do you know where we're going here today?" And he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Think about it. Why are we going to this school today?" And he says, "To give a talk." And I said, "No, no, no." I says, "Break it down. Why are we going here?" He says, "You're going to talk about your mental illness." I says, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, but dig it down further." And he goes, "I don't get what you mean." I said, "Tiernan, we're going to this school today, and I'm going to talk to 200 people, because medically speaking, on paper, I'm not well in the head."
Mhm.
And I says, not to use that term to be dismissive. I'm
Yeah.
not making a joke of it. Do you know, it's like, according to doctors, my brain is completely unhealthy.
Yeah.
And it's because of that flaw that I'm a public speaker, and I'm about to walk in here and help 200 people.
Yeah.
I have no education in this area, but I'm talking about the supposed flaw I have. And I take pride in it now. It's like, medically speaking, yes, there's a malfunction in my brain of some kind, and I have no fucking shame in it, because I didn't pick it, but I've learned to live with it. And I think we really need to give people that idea that, you didn't choose this battle, but you're winning it. And one
Yeah.
thing, and I'm off on a tangent here, sorry, but the one problem I do have, I'm going now. One thing I don't like about mental health advocacy in general in this country is we tend to wrap it in cotton wool.
Mhm.
I did a panel discussion one time with an eating disorder awareness organization. I won't say who they were, but I had a talk with the organizer beforehand, and they kind of vetted and censored what I was going to say. Nothing triggering could be said. I
Mhm.
wasn't allowed to mention the gym. I couldn't mention how the gym was part of my recovery. It literally, they cut my story down to a third, and there was no authenticity in what I said because of the fear of being triggered. Now I understand where they're coming from, but when you wrap mental health and mental illness in cotton wool, I think the problem that happens is this: you've got someone listening to the webinar or the seminar or whatever, who's got anxiety, who's got depression, who's got whatever, and they're really struggling, and you're telling them what it's like, but you're telling a corporate nice version of the story, and they're going to listen and think, "So okay, that's what it's meant to be like, but I've got it 10 times worse.
Mhm.
Maybe I'm beyond saving, maybe I'm beyond help, maybe I'm the problem." And then you leave people feeling even more hopeless, even more beyond help. Whereas, in my opinion, and in every talk I've ever done, I'm raw and I'm unfiltered, and I say, "Look, I'm going to talk about this thing and tell you how terrible it is. And I'm going to use the triggering words. I'm going to mention suicide. I'm going to mention every triggering word you can think of, because better to face the demon, better to tell people how powerful it is. So if you're living with that and you survive, you can end every day and go, well, I fucking won that battle." And
Mhm.
you can have a bit of pride in yourself and pat yourself on the back, because anyone who suffers with their mental health knows that simply just functioning, whether it be going to work or going to the gym or raising your kids, whatever it is, the stuff that most people take for granted, it can be 10 times harder when you're anxious, when you're depressed, and so on. And at least if you tell people and you give them some credit for how bad it is, they can pat themselves in the back and go, "Well, I won that battle." And I
Yeah.
really think that would help people if we push that idea.
Well, that's 100%. I agree. And I like we've had people on giving their experiences, and it's so important to, talk about the recovery, but we delve, well, I like to think we delve, I certainly have, and you have today, like delve deeply into what was happening at the time. And like you talk about yourself at your worst so they can see where you've come. Like you go into that school to speak in front of 200 people, like to speak in front of 200 people for a lot of people is madness anyway,
Yeah,
to use. So it's the idea that you're able to go and do it is it's you know but it's very well, I couldn't have said it better myself. I do want to talk about this idea, like, that's weird that they didn't want you mentioned the gym. I don't understand that part, but I want to talk about that because it is hugely important to you and hugely important to your mental health. When did you get into it? Obviously, you were training. You said you were training for football. Well, when did you get into kind of the weight side of thing?
So it's again it's funny how it happened. So I the anorexia hit when I was 13, so lost a lot of weight and was underweight and so on. And I actually got the weight back on quite quickly once I went to counselling and figured out and realized that I had to get the weight back on
Hmm.
to survive. I got the weight back on quite quickly, but I had missed a year. Like again, between 13 and 14, lads grow very quickly. Like lads shoot up in height and they fill out. So I had lost a year. So when I got like as I was turning 15, let's say, friends of mine were, not far off 6 foot tall and they've got the broad shoulders. They're 12, 13 stone. I was way behind.
Hmm.
I still had the frame of a 12-year-old, let's say. And when you're playing like under 14, under 16 football, that's really going to hold you back. So this was now my sort of disadvantage. So I realized, and as well as that, given my smaller stature, I was getting bullied quite a bit,
Okay.
just simply because I was an easy target. And you know what? I actually don't hold it against anyone because when you're an easy target, it happens. It's culture. It's terrible, but it happens.
Hmm.
And literally, I kind of said to myself, two big problems here, both of which are the root cause is I'm too small. So I kind of went, well, there's only one way out of this. And again, this is 2013, 2014. Didn't have Instagram. Fitness content on YouTube wasn't as widespread. And mother of God, the stuff that was there, like I've watched back some of the things that I watched. People hadn't a clue, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, all I knew, I bought myself a couple of dumbbells and all I knew was you lift it up, you put it down, you do it until you're tired and you eat more. And I think I gained something like 25 kilos in about 2.5 years. And literally the only reason that happened was because this wasn't done for the crack.
Yeah.
This was pure survival. This was like you either do this and you sort out this problem or you keep living the way you are. And I couldn't do that. Like the abuse I was getting in school and the heartbreak of the sport I love being taken away by being too small. So I turned to the gym in that way. And then when I got to about 17, I realized, well, I'm not great at football, but I love the gym.
Mm.
So if I have any sporting talent, it lies in this area. So I quit and I started powerlifting when I was about 19. And it just becomes part of life. And I think
Yeah.
it even if your mental health's in a good place and you don't struggle with it, I think it's great for discipline, it's great for
Hmm.
routine, and it has positive ripple effects in every area of life, be it your work, your family, and so on. But I think from a mental health point of view, it's so because again, the whole thing of meditation or counteracting anxiety is get out of the mind, get into the body, and
Yeah.
nothing does that better than exercise.
Yeah.
And again, when I talk about that eating disorder webinar, I understand where they were coming from about not mentioning the gym because they don't want to let anorexic people think that exercise is the solution. I can see where they're
Okay.
coming.
Yeah.
However, I do think exercise and movement in general is medicine, be it physically and mentally. So it's become a part of life now, and it's something I do without thinking in the gym 3 or 4 days a week, and it's a release more than
Yeah.
anything else. If you're stressed at work or whatever, like you go in and that's now your safe space. You get to throw around a bit of weight for an hour, and you come out feeling $1 million. It's an absolute blessing, and I'm so glad. Like in the last 5 years or so, the gym culture in Ireland has really taken off,
Hmm.
because like the first gym opened in my hometown in 2016. And like at first, small crowd went to it, but then over time, more people went to it. The culture became more appropriated. It's brilliant to see it. It's
Hmm.
fantastic because we're an old fashioned thinking kind of country and the gym is very new and we're starting to adapt to it. And I love to see it. I think it's brilliant.
I uh, I noticed with lifting in particular, um, about achievements and like hitting targets and things like that. And I don't like in everyday life. I talked to someone about this recently. Everyday life, there's not always that kind of idea of achievements. But if you
Mhm.
go into the gym and you're deadlifting whatever 120 kilograms, and that's what your that goal is, and you finally after a couple of months get that extra 2.5 on it or whatever. It's such a big thing, like, and it might sound silly to someone who doesn't, maybe practice it, and do lifting and stuff, but we don't really have those things in life where we have those little achievements and goals, especially as adults. And do you think that's an important part of your gym life?
Completely.
Okay.
It's the idea of there's a great phrase. It's I can't remember what it is, but something to do with like when you progress in anything, especially if it's something important to you,
Mhm.
the feeling of that is because one thing I notice is, Western culture, we glamorize comfort, we glamorize
Yeah.
convenience, whereas in reality, that's not the key to being happy at all. There is great pride in facing discomfort and in overcoming barriers. So that, as you say, that increment of weight and that achievement, there's so much in that. And again, it's that feeling of progress. And again, you know, you mightn't have that in other areas of life, be
Yeah.
it, and to have that in the gym is fantastic. And it's you literally, and as you say, looking in from the outside to someone who doesn't do it, it seems so all you've done is put another piece of metal on the bar and lift it.
Yeah.
No, it means more than that. And
Mhm.
it's I think as well, it goes beyond that. It's kind of a subconscious thing. It's like, right, well, if I can tackle that, I can tackle something in my work life. I can tackle this problem in my personal life. I can tackle this problem with my mental health. It's that sort of, there's a great phrase. You don't build self confidence by shouting affirmations in the mirror. You build self confidence by having a stack of evidence that you are who you say you are. And I think another great one for this is cold showers, because I believe
Right.
that 95% of people can't stand under cold water, but if you can, you know that you're outside of the norm,
Yeah.
and that has, when you're in your place of work, then you go, oh, and if I fucking face the cold water, I can face this problem. I can
That's true.
face this call. I can face this client. This is no bother. I sure
Yeah.
I had a far bigger battle at 7:30 this morning. There's that element of it, and I think the gym does the same thing. It's like it has that knock-on effect in other areas of life. You go, well, if I could lift that 2.5 kilos more, well, then this, talking for this crowd is no problem, or giving this presentation is no problem. It's fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah, it's an interesting way to flip it around there, like to use it as your advantage, like in other
absolutely.
situations. And I think you're right, like, because people aren't doing that. They don't understand how you can use it in different things. And I'm all about doing things rather than sitting down and listening to someone shouting about it, or do you know what I mean? Like you get stuck in and get
Absolutely.
involved. It's a lot more important. So another thing, like as if there's not enough things you do. So you're an author as well. Can you tell us a bit about your book Normal, if you don't mind?
Of course. Yeah. So it's, you know what, it's funny how this happened. It really is. Like, there's that phrase. There's a friend of mine in college used to say, like, when something strange had happened, he'd say you couldn't write it. Like, as in,
Yeah.
stranger than fiction. Like, I do believe that things happen for a reason. And I'm not religious, but I believe in God in some sense. And the reason I
Mm.
say that is because I when I was so I mentioned earlier on that one of the things that triggers my mental health is periods of change. And I can see that now so clearly because my mental health floored me on 3 occasions. When I finished primary school, when I finished secondary school, and when I finished college. And the second one there, when I finished secondary school, I went to college in Galway. I couldn't wait to go to Galway. And ironically, most people, this is a tangent, but I am getting there.
That's
Most
right.
people who go to college in Galway, they can't wait for the nightlife and all the crack. I had no interest in that at all. I didn't drink till I was in second year. And I just couldn't wait to go to a new city, go somewhere new, and go to a bigger gym and all this crack. That was all well and good. And I couldn't wait for this move. And then when I did move, my mental health floored me. Now I didn't understand at the time that it was the anxieties behind anorexia. I didn't have any more problem with food, but the
Hmm.
anxiety came back, and it came back in abundance. And I didn't realize what was happening. I just thought I'm overthinking, I'm OCD, or whatever it is. So my mental health began to give me a lot of trouble. And I was in a relationship at the time. My mental health began to take a toll on that relationship. And at the end of my first year in college, that relationship broke up. And between that and the anxiety, the two of them completely floored me to the point where I became depressed beyond belief. And one thing I say often in talks is, for young people, especially in college, be very wary of your relationship with alcohol, because we have a funny relationship with alcohol as a country in general, but particularly when you're 18 to 25,
Yeah.
because it's very acceptable to go ham at it and have the crack 4 nights a week and no one bats an eyelid. So it's very easy to turn to that. So I started drinking alcohol. I went out and had the crack, but I started drinking for the wrong reasons. It was an
Yeah.
escape. But what this led to, as if by the guidance from God, what this led to was a lot of very in-depth, deep conversations with friends of mine. I began talking about mental health in ways that I hadn't before because I had to. If I
Hmm.
didn't, I wasn't going to survive. I began opening up. And what I realized was I had several conversations with people, and I realized Jesus, everyone is battling with something. Everyone's got a cross to bear, because when I gave my trouble, someone else told me about theirs. And people started telling me stuff, and they started trusting me with things. And oftentimes the way the story would finish is they would say, Jesus, Conor, I've never talked about that before.
Yeah.
And I'm listening to them going, what you've just told me floored you. And you've never voiced this ever. You've been
Hmm.
bottling this up. And I began to realize how bad the stigma is, how much everyone suffers, be it with their mental health or just some problem in life in general. And I began to realize we don't talk enough. And again, everyone, but I am biased towards young men, because I do believe that there is that pressure on men to not talk. And a few months go by, and I was in a nightclub one night, and I will never ever forget this. It was December 2018. In a nightclub with a friend of mine. I knew this fella about 12 months, and he was kind of nice guy. He kept his cards close to his chest. He
Hmm.
didn't give much away about how he was feeling, but he got to trust me. And on this particular evening, he told me about some stuff he'd gone through as a young man, and it was tough stuff. And I was listening to him, and I was thinking, I would love to have this. Now, we were hammered. I would love to have this conversation with everyone.
Yeah.
But it says you can't have a million double vodkas in a million smoking areas in one lifetime, because I think we all live for an average of about 30,000 days. So we're not going to manage that. But I said, well, what I could do, I could take the story and I could write it and I could give it to the public that way. And I stood there, and with slurred words, I said to my friend, I'm going to write a book. And he said, you do that. Walked home, wrote the idea down in a hardback, woke up the following morning, saw it, and I went, I've no clue how I'm going to do this. But I something in me tells me this is worth following.
Yeah.
Told a few friends, some of them kind of went, Conor, your use of English isn't great. Let's be honest here now.
Yeah.
I was doing maths and physics in college. I was the furthest on the spectrum of courses. I was the opposite end of
Yeah.
creative. Right? They went, you're not really built for this. And I went, I know that, but something tells me this is going to work.
Yeah.
But I told another few friends, and some of my friends really believed it, and they said, go for it. And one friend of mine, the gentleman Tiernan I mentioned, who's my business partner now, I told him, and he went, that's a good plan. And he went to his godmother. She's his godmother, but she might as well be his aunt. She might as well
Yeah.
be family. Very, very wealthy woman. She has a business in England. And he went to her and he told her about it. He didn't tell me this. And then he came back to me and he goes, come here, he says, my aunt has invited myself and yourself over to England for a couple of days, just for a small holiday. He says, don't worry about the money. So as a cab man, I went, right, free trip to London. I'm on the boat, on the plane, no problem. Went over, that was grand. 13th of June 2019, sitting in a pub called the Weir Bar in Brentford. I'll never forget it. And we're sitting there, and Tiernan says, Miriam, Conor is thinking about writing a book. And she goes, really, Conor? No, tell me more. So they had planned all this.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
went, oh, God, how am I going to explain this now? And I gave her the bones of the story of what I'd gone through and what I wanted to do and why I wanted to do it. And she sat and she listened. She went, okay. And bear in mind, this woman's worth more than all the dragons on Dragon's Den put together. And she went, she put her hand and she said, I'll give you 12 months. You come back to me in 12 months with a book and I'll pay for it to be published. Well, I went pale. I couldn't say thank you. I just said deal and I shook her hand. I didn't even own a laptop. Got back to Ireland, bought one straight away, and I sat and I looked at it and I said, this is going to work.
Mm.
Wrote like hell for 6 months. I was in my third year of college. I was working in Supermax and I was in the gym about 3 nights a week. I was getting about 5 hours sleep a night, living off of Monster caffeine. I aged about 5 years in 6 months, I'd say. I got 6 months in and I went, I'm behind time here now. I'm spread too thin. This isn't going to work. And I had a bit of money in savings and I left my job in Supermax for 6 months. It's the biggest risk I've ever taken because as a student, leaving your job is a fucking no-go. But I said, this has to be done. And I remember handing my notice in Supermax and walking out thinking, this is it. This is, in terms of poker reference, we're all in now on a pair of aces. This is it. Wrote for the next 6 months. I sent Miriam the final draft the day before the deadline. And I said, here you go. This is it. It was about 45,000 words. And a month later, she rings me and she says, we have a deal. You're getting, I was through a self-publishing agency. She says, you're getting published. Well, I cried my eyes out because I thought to myself, I've been living with this thing for 9 years and it's made my life hell. But now it serves a purpose. Now I've got something that can show people there is something beyond your darkest moments. There is a life beyond it. There's light at the end of the tunnel. There is hope. And these are all cliche things, but it's like there genuinely is. From your darkest hours, there genuinely is something beyond it. And from there, things just kind of spiraled. I was on about 7 radio stations in the next 3 months giving interviews, and it all just took off. And I've become a public speaker off the back of it. And it really is mad how it happened. How I met these certain people,
Yeah,
how I ended
yeah.
up in this room. It's madness, and it's been a privilege every single second of it. It really has.
How was it for you? Because this is, when I had a breakdown and I wrote a novel afterwards, and the hardest thing was to give it to my parents, because it was basically what happened to me, and then a kind of a fake town around it and fake people around it. Do you know, like everything else is made up, but the central idea of the story was about me, and I gave it to other people as well. Were you, because I know your parents knew about it, but were you worried about any kind of negative reaction to that? That particular part of it, rather than the criticism of the writing or whatever.
So the first thing I did before the book was sent off to be published, I gave a copy to a couple of friends of mine
Hmm.
to review it and see what they thought of it. And I gave a copy to my mother and to my aunt. And I said to them, I says, "You're the only two family I'm giving this to. I trust your opinion." I says, "If anything I say here is," because I say nothing negative about family, because I have nothing
Yeah.
negative to say. My family are fantastic. But I says, I am being very open. And I says, if anything here is too public, tell me and I will axe it straight away. They had no problem. They read it. They said, "Look, you're being honest. You're being
Yeah.
authentic." This, and I said, "Right, I've gotten the thumbs up from the main judge and juror. We're away. Perfect." Do you know what I mean? So I would never have published anything
Mm.
without family, and all my family have read it and they've said everything you've said is bang on. Like, I do go into detail about like the difficulties that can arise between father and son,
Yeah.
because again, the generation before us didn't have the grasp of mental health that we have. And that caused friction between me and my father. I talk about it honestly, but not in a negative way. And the best closure I ever had was my father's closest friends read the book and they said, "We know you, we know him, and everything you said was perfect. You said
Yeah.
it tastefully, you said it honestly, you gave a great account of it. What you said was perfect." And I went, "Right, I've gotten the go ahead from the most important people in terms of family and friends and so on. This is safe to go out to the public." So that was kind of the go ahead there.
What I found quite difficult was when I gave it to my parents, and my father said to me that he didn't realize that I was having it as hard as I was. He knew everything that had happened because I was living with him at the time. But obviously, but I found it easier to tell my mother everything that was going on and the really, really difficult things, the ideas of what I was thinking, like, about take my own life and stuff like that. But after he kind of said it to me, I kind of it got me thinking about why didn't I say it to my dad more? Why didn't I talk to him about it a bit more? Um, and was it just because, like, the whole cliche of like boys and their mothers and girls and their dads, and that this kind of thing. And I that was the one thing that kind of afterwards I kind of felt a bit not bad about, because these things just happen in time and that's the way they work. But I was sad about the fact that, like, he learned more from the book than he did from coming from me.
Yeah, it's funny because like my mother said something similar to me.
Hmm.
I wrote it out and I gave it to my mother and she said, "Jesus, Conor, like we knew it was rough going, but not this bad."
Hmm.
And she said, like you didn't say this at the time. And I said, "Mother, I mother sounds posh. We're not posh at all. I say it, mother, in an ironic way.
Yeah,
She "Oh, don't call me that." But I said, "Do I take the piss?" I said, "Mother, I didn't have the words when I was 12.
yeah, that's
I didn't
fair.
have the words when I was 13. There's a great scene that show Peaky Blinders. Tommy Shelby goes, "The words haven't fucking been invented yet." I didn't have the way of putting it. And I says, it took me till I was 20, 21 to, even then have a chance of putting it on paper. And I think I'm 25 now. If I'd waited till now, I would have phrased it even better, because I think now I have a solid relationship with those experiences.
Yeah.
Rather than being still in them, I'm observing them like a third party. Even when I was 20, 21, I was still scarred by them in ways that I didn't even realize. I'm even more clear headed now, but that's how long it took to see these things through quite a clear lens. So, it's very easy to say, why wasn't more said at the time? It's like, well, I couldn't see it as clearly. I couldn't interpret it as clearly. Now I get it. But
Yeah.
I do get what you mean, that sort of idea of, it's hard to say it at the time.
Yeah.
It really is. And it's much easier to be honest in hindsight. So I understand that. But definitely, like myself, like, again, it was easier myself to talk about it with my mother, because my mother is, I suppose, slightly more open-minded and slightly more with the times than my father would
Yeah.
be, just because of generational differences. You know what I mean? Just the
Yeah.
way they are. So that I understand where you're coming from there. But yeah, it is tough. It is, because, again, I've seen it with friends. Like, friends said, "No, Conor, like, that's heavy stuff you just wrote there. Like, we didn't know." And it's like,
Yeah.
I didn't even fully get it either,
Yeah.
and now I know, and now I'm able to phrase it. So, again, I think it's the clarity that comes with hindsight that allows us to
Yeah.
phrase these things better.
I think that yeah, the clarity that comes to hindsight, and also I think my vocabulary around the subject became better as I went through therapy, and it was explained to me what exactly was happening, because it's very difficult
Yes.
for you to turn around and just start telling the worst things, because that's normally the thing you do, is you say the worst things that's on your mind. But in saying that, you're also trying to protect your parents at the same time,
Yeah.
like, even as the child, and you think they're the ones that are there to protect you. But when you become a man, you become a grown up, all of a sudden you realize, like, this could really hurt them or worry them or make them anxious, and all of a sudden you start bottling the stuff up, and they're probably the most likely people who will look after you and care for you and bring you, and get that kind of loving arm around you. So it was just one of those things that I wanted to ask you, and you answered it very well. Just that idea of, putting stuff out in words for people to read. You've got a new project you mentioned there. Can you give us anything around that, and what are your writing routines these days like?
So, well, the first book was like, it was kind of, and then it was mental health told through like a life story, like chronological order. And there's a lot, like, there's, so you could say it's anorexia mainly, but there's anxiety. I talk about anxiety. I talk about, the whole rural Ireland and the stigma and so on. There's a lot going on. But as I got older, I realized, like, I believe I can talk about mental health as a whole, but my main area of expertise is anorexia, and particularly being a male with anorexia, I'm a part of a much smaller group. I have a very unique insight into something that's very, very niche. And I said, if I'm going to write more, I want to pencil in on that. And also, because one thing I realized as I got older was, there's so many misconceptions around mental health in general, but particularly around anorexia, because it's only when I went back to counseling as an adult, I realized that, if you Google what is anorexia nervosa in particular, because bulimia is more the binge eating one. It's nervosa, which is the starvation one that I have. When you Google what that is, it says food, body image, weight loss. And one thing that I think is wrong, sometimes when you Google what is anorexia, it'll be described as a loss of appetite. That's bullshit. Because I lost a fair amount of weight when I was a child. At no point was I not hungry.
Right.
Like, I would have took the hand off you, like, come here, I was in a house full of food, full of good cooking. I would have only loved to have let myself enjoy it. But, the hunger's there.
Hmm.
You're not allowing yourself to give into it. And I joke now, because I do weight cuts for powerlifting, and they're done in a controlled way. And friends of mine go, "That's a tough cut. That's low calories." And I joke, I go, "Come here, I've done worse." And I joke about it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Kind of way.
Yeah.
But, as I got older, I realized I got very bad anxiety when I started college, and I got terribly bad anxiety when I left college and started working. And a counselor explained to me, she said, "Conor, these anxious thoughts, they're your anorexia." And I went, "No, it's not, because I'm eating fine." She said, "No, Conor, anorexia runs far deeper than that."
Hmm.
And then I began to realize I was having the exact same feelings at 23 as I was at 19, as I was at 12. Even though food wasn't always involved, I had the same feeling, I had the same thoughts. There was deja vu all the way through. I could identify moments that were almost identical in time. And I said, this now makes sense. And I suppose what I wanted to do was, in my second book, is talk about anorexia in particular and say, look, this is much more than just a food thing. Food and weight loss is the manifestation of it.
Hmm.
This runs way deeper. And this affects your life in a much deeper way than just diet and just exercise and just body image. And, like, what I began to realize as I got older is when I was younger, it was all a feeling. It was the feeling of don't eat. It was,
Lost him. I lost Conor.
and I've learned through
You're
counseling and
back.
therapy to separate the voice and me and know where the thoughts are coming from. And they actually say you should personalize the voice and give it a name. So I call mine George, was the first name that came to my head. And if I'm struggling, the lads will go, "How's George today?" I go, "Oh, he's fucking giving me hassle, so he is the bastard." You know. And what I realized is he's more than just body image and weight. He's self-doubt.
Mm-hmm.
He's self-deprecation. He's low self-esteem. He's low self-worth. He's this thing that, and the better life goes for me, the worse he gets.
Yeah.
Because he will tell me something's going to have to break here. Something's going to fall apart. And I realized there's so many limiting beliefs that come into play there. And I said, Jesus, this beast is a lot more complex than it was ever explained to me.
Yeah.
So I want to go again, right again, and show people that there are feelings here way beyond food and diet that are going to put your life to the test that's coming from the same source. And in terms of writing routines, it's kind of like I work 9 to 6 and I try and be at the laptop 9 to 8. So I do a couple of hours after work and try and get it in that way. Like it'll be another year or two before it is finished at all. I'm kind of one thing I've learned from the first book is do not rush.
Yeah.
You can't force the idea. You can't force things to fall together. They naturally take their place and the words naturally come to you. So I've learned that to kind of don't give a deadline, don't put pressure on it. It'll fall into place over time and the ideas will come to you. So there is a set writing routine kind of there, but there's no pressure on myself to get it across the line, whether it's done in 2 years or 5 years, as long as it's done right. There's a great phrase. I don't want to move quickly. I want to move correctly. So
Yeah.
that's the plan.
I think that's the way to do it. And obviously, with the first book, those circumstances all led to a kind of a deadline situation. And I understand where you're coming from with what you're doing now. There's another thing that I kind of wanted to mention, and anxiety is different to nerves, and I get that more than most, I would imagine. But doing things that you do, like standing up in front of people, we mentioned, is nerve wracking for a lot of people. You compete in powerlifting. Competing is nerve wracking for a lot of people. Are you ever do you ever sit down and just go, "Well, I just relax for an hour"?
I do, yeah. The funny, I find it hard to switch off.
Yeah.
I do. What friends of mine will tell you, I don't drink much. I don't drink much anymore. I have the odd one here and there. But if I go on a night out, by the end of a night out, I'm thinking of things I have to do, and not in a
Yeah.
bad way. I'm in a positive way. I'm thinking about ideas. I'm thinking about what I have to do next, and so on. And ideas are coming and going. I find it hard to switch off.
Yeah.
But I do my best. I love films. Like
Yeah.
I love watching films, and I'll rewatch the same film 10 times if it's a good one. Like I could quote the whole of there's a film called Heat with Al Pacino and Robert
Oh,
De Niro.
yeah.
I could quote the whole thing. Or I love Quentin Tarantino films like
Yeah.
Django, great film. That kind of thing. That's how I switch off. I like doing accents and impressions, so I switch off that way. Do you know what I mean? So like I that's kind of the way I'll do it. But it is tough. It is
Yeah.
kind of you're always thinking of the next thing. But I've learned that you have the rest too, and you have to be in the moment, and you
Yeah.
can't always be 3 days ahead. You
Yeah.
know,
Uh, like, I want to ask you as well, because a couple of weeks ago I did a little episode, just came out before the new year, and it was about how I don't really like the idea of resolutions, but I like the idea of improvements and switching things up a little bit, but not that whole thing about I'm going to drop everything in this to do like everything in that and that kind of idea. Do you approach a new year with goals or resolutions or anything like that?
not really.
Good.
There is some wee feeling of like, oh, fresh start, but I think really and truly resolutions are absolute bullshit because I think 99% of people don't stick to them.
Yeah.
And the idea of if you've something you want to do and it's the 27th of December and you go, we'll wait till the first,
Yeah.
you don't really fucking want to do it. If you want to make a change, you'll make it today. And yes, I do believe relax over Christmas, and I've had a relaxing December. It was fantastic. I do believe in that. But the idea of, right, when the first comes now, I'm going to be a different man. Cold showers, fruit and veg, no drink. Best luck with it. Like, I don't mean to be condescending.
No.
The amount of people who do that and then by the 6th of Jan, by today, game over.
Yeah.
You know, and it's a fantastic book called Atomic Habits by James Clear. I would mandatory reading material, I think, for everyone. And the idea of the book is you are what you do. You are what you eat, you are what you drink, you are how you think. You are every movement you ever make. So, you know, a quick fix for 12 weeks is going to fix nothing. You know what I mean? A fad diet, a rush, this, that, and the other is not going to work. You have to make changes that'll last a long time. There's sorry, I'm whacking out a lot of phrases here now, but they're coming to me as I'm going. There's a phrase, I'm an engineer by trade, and there's a phrase, in the case of an emergency, you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in everyday life, we don't rise to our expectations, we sink to the level of our habits. And you see this if you see this when people win the lotto and in 5 years' time they've no money left because they never learned money habits. But you know, you give that same amount of money to someone who's financially literate, everything's fine. Because we no matter what we're given, we sink to the level of our habits. So you could go on a fad diet for 12 weeks and lose 3 stone. You'll have it back on in 6 months because you haven't built the habits to keep the weight off. You know, so I truly believe that unless you build habits and build them slowly and build them sustainably, nothing will change. But having said that, the smallest of changes on a daily basis, I believe, can help everything. And that can help your mental health, your physical health, your performance. And I think the one thing people think is, the misconception we have is that it takes moving mountains to change your life. It doesn't. It takes a fucking small change today, but keep doing it tomorrow, keep doing it the next day. And again, cold showers is an example. The health benefits and the mental benefits and so on. That's 2-3 minutes out of your day.
Yeah.
But you try doing that every day and you'll eventually see that it is tough. But if you can be consistent with it, you'll see the benefits of it. So I think, you know, never mind resolutions, can you be consistent with a small positive change? And then you'll see the benefits of it.
The whole consistency thing is it's so important. I think I'm a coach in the gym I go to, and you know, there's younger lads in there, like, you know, 20 or whatever, and I'm in there. I train at the same time every day. You know, obviously don't do the same things, but it's CrossFit and it's jiu-jitsu. So it's a couple of different things and we'll be doing different movements or whatever. But it's just being there and doing it, you know, and that's those little improvements that we talked about earlier on with regards to lifting, or maybe you couldn't do a strict pull-up and all of a sudden you're getting one strict pull-up and all these things. It's because of that consistency. It's not like you can't just turn up once every 2 weeks and expect these kind of things to happen. And, you know, you mentioned there about someone's going to start the cold showers, go on to the fruit and veg, go to cycle out, you know, that kind of thing. It's like overloading yourself with these new things in your life. It's completely ridiculous that you would think that this would kind of carry on. So yeah, it's perfect to think that, like, be consistent, make those slight improvements or adjustments to whatever you're doing. And I think that's the way to go. I wanted to make sure to ask you, Conor, where people can find your book, Normal.
Absolutely. So the main provider there is Amazon. So it's Normal by Conor Nolan. That's Conor spelled with one N because people make that mistake. So Amazon is your main go-to there.
And it's also, because I got it on Apple, so it's on. Did I get it on Apple? Where did I get it?
There is an ebook. Yeah, there is.
There's an ebook, yeah, because I have it on my phone here. And sometimes I forget. Do you know what I was very impressed by, Conor? Not everything, obviously, but in particular, the way you can remember phrases. I really have a problem with quotes and phrases because I'll start, and then all of a sudden I'll be like, what's the rest of that bit? You have a great. Is it something? Look, is that just something that you're able to retain, or do you like sit down and think I have to remember this because this is going to be important going forward?
No, I think in general I have a great memory, and ironically now, do you know what? It's a blessing and a curse, right? I'll tell you this. I will remember. I'm terrible with names. I'm terrible with names, and I'm actually not great with birthdays either, right?
Okay.
But I'm very good with small details that you probably shouldn't remember, right?
Yeah.
So I could meet someone, right? Say like in college, meet someone at a house party. I could meet someone randomly. I won't remember their name, but they could tell me that their brother is studying law in Trinity and he's in his 4th year. I can meet them 6 months later and go, "Oh, geez, how did your brother get on with the course?" And they go, "What?" And then you're the weird cunt for remembering that.
Yeah, yeah, that was.
You know, you have to remember, okay, no, maybe I shouldn't say this, because maybe you have to think, what should and should I not remember? You have to do, maybe I shouldn't say this. This will seem
Try
really
and forget. You should have to try and forget stuff and then remember
I
the
have
bit.
to force things out. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, a lot of the phrase, I like, again, like I have movie quotes just sitting, you know what I mean? I could ramble on, It just kind of, it's a blessing. Stuff just kind of sticks, kind of.
That's fair enough. Listen, Conor, you've been a terrific guest, and obviously for opening up about everything that you do, not just to me, but all over the country. But it sounds of things, and it's so important to young people and older people to kind of realize and understand these things. If you don't mind, could you stick with me for a minute, and I'll close this out, and we'll get a quick photo on a snapshot on the laptop, and we'll be on our way.
Perfect.
Is that
Spot
all
on.
right?
No
Perfect.
bother at all.
All right. I also want to thank John for doing all the technical stuff that he does. I always thank my mum, my dad, my granddad, Jared and Calvin. We are on YouTube if you'd like to subscribe. We're on Instagram, Facebook. Actually, where can we find you on Instagram, Conor?
CONOR_N7.
Excellent. We're also on Facebook and X. I still don't like saying X.
That's Twitter, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or it was Twitter. It was
It
Twitter.
was
Sorry.
Twitter.
Yeah.
I just don't know. It sounds weird.
Not his fault.
Well, you know the way it's that thing about like that you still tweet, but it's not called Twitter. It's called X. So.
It's so. What do they call a tweet now? What's that called? A post?
I think they call it a tweet. They still think they call it. So do you know what was the point? Anyway, control. That's what it was. But anyway, we're also on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, Google Podcasts, etc. Obviously, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in today, as always. And once again, Conor, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, sir. Thank you.
And see you next week, everyone. Bye.